Chemena Kamali had a really, really good interview in Vogue, and I thought it would be a good place to start because normally when fashion designers have some time at a brand, they then sit down for a really long-winded, very detailed feature on them, which is always really good to read, and it's always really good to see kind of what they have to say about their brand and what kind of thoughts they have, what their vision is for the brand, those kind of things. Um, so it was really, really great to see this. Um, and Chimena Kamali, to be honest, I think that she's a designer that has done really well. I think that she was definitely brought to bring a certain edge and a certain buzz to Chimena Kamali. And I 100% think that she's done that. I think when you think of Chimena Kamali, and even if you think of how Chloe has been over the years, you start to think of the designer that she took over from, which was Gabriela Hearst, who was a designer that I think was really good. I think that she did a good Chloe. There wasn't necessarily a buzz or hype around Chloe the same way when we associate Chloe with Karl Lagerfeld or Stella McCartney or Phoebe Philo. These are times when it was really hyped. Even Claire White Keller, there was a really, really strong backing when she was there. And I think with Gabriella Hearst, she was kind of more low key. She's very obviously lauded and well respected for her commitment to sustainability, which was very, very commendable when she was at Chloe. But the reason she actually left, I do commend it a lot because I'm not sure how many of you know, but Gabriella Hearst actually left because the stress of running her brand in New York and then also designing at Chloé in Paris was just too much. And so she decided that it actually isn't sustainable to manage one brand in Paris and one brand in New York. And so she decided to quit her job at Chloé to focus on her own brand, which is so commendable because we have these conversations all the time about designers like Marc Jacobs, who I absolutely love, who was he literally got ground into a wall and ended up having to go to rehab when he was at Louis Vuitton. We saw what happened to the likes of John Galliano. We saw what happened to the likes of Lee McQueen. And I really like that this new generation of fashion designers are actually putting themselves first. I think that it's a very, very commendable thing. And while I think probably Chimena Kamali is going to do a much better job at Chloe than Gabriella Hearst, I strongly commend her for deciding that it wasn't working for her. The workload was too much and really focusing on what she wants to focus on. So, yeah, going back to this interview, she did an amazing interview with British Vogue. Of course, the title says Chimena Kamali on femininity, power dressing, and remaking Chloe for a new era. Chloe with the accent, of course. At Chloe, creative director Chimena Kamali is championing a new era of femininity, blending the house's bohemian past with her own blossoming power. Um, and now, this interview was very interesting. There were some key takeaways. Before I even read the interview, I kind of thought that it would be Chimena Kamali kind of talking about her vision for Chloe and where she wants Chloe to go and kind of how she sees Chloe. And yes, there was that in the article. A lot of it was actually just talking about who she is and what she's done in the past and as a designer, what she stands for. Which in a sense I definitely appreciate because I think that, a lot of designers these days, they aren't very known. Like a lot of people don't really know about her story. And I guess in this article, they used it as a chance for you to kind of learn about her story. Um, and it wasn't just about, the Chloe ideas that she has and all those kind of things. I'm putting her runway show on the screen now. Just so you guys can be reminded of her debut collection because this collection was actually really big and it was really successful in my opinion. Um, but yeah, it talks about how she's had 2 tenures at Chloe. I don't know how many of you actually know. She actually, when she finished studying fashion design in Germany, she interned at Chloe when Phoebe Philo was still there. Then she had so many different roles and worked in fashion across many years before returning to Chloe in a bigger role. And now this, her being the creative director at Chloe, is actually her third role at Chloe over the years. It's her third time back at the brand. So when we talk about someone understanding the true essence of the brand, I think it's very, very important that you have someone who has worked there so many times before, under multiple creative directors, seen many different visions. And she's also very, very knowledgeable about the archive and very aware about the archive. So that's something that I definitely appreciate. It almost reminds me of Alessandra Michele. Of course, Alessandra Michele's time at Gucci was a bit different in the sense that Alessandra Michele was there like in one long go, whereas Chemena Kamali has kind of gone and come back, gone and come back, gone and come back. But it's just I like it when brands hire people who, you know, actually know about the brand and hire people that are very privy to the history and know how the brand works. They understand the inner workings of the brand rather than having someone who's just, completely external from the brand. Dami, how you doing?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you clearly.
Great, great, great. Yeah, I was just listening in on what you were saying. Hopefully, it's not giving you feedback.
No, it's fine.
All
Audio's
right,
sounding
great.
really good.
All right, then let's go.
What did you, before I keep going in on the article, the British Vogue article, what did you think of the article?
The article, it was quite well detailed. Like I did actually glean some things about her life. Like when I read these articles, because some of the fashion history, well, let's say her CV is like kind of quite known to us. Two things I try to glean is like the personality through the quotes and like what they choose to say, because these guys sometimes are media trained before these interviews, aren't they? So
Right.
I like to like glean some sort of personality from the quotes and how they choose to answer and what they choose to answer directly, right? And then
Hmm.
the things around their lives, right? So I got to learn those two things also. So got learned what her husband did, where her dad is from, all of those things like that. And then,
Yeah,
just
even her journey from like the fact she obviously was in Germany and then she moved to California. And
exactly.
they were saying in the article that California is where she really got her love of fashion. Like
Yeah.
she's always had a love of fashion because obviously her parents ran a store. But then when she was in California, she saw like a certain lifestyle and the way people were dressing, and she was really inspired by it. And it was also one of the big reasons why she wanted to become a fashion designer. Of course, she then returned to Germany. She studied fashion design at a university in Germany. Then she interned at Chloé before doing her MA at Central St. Martin's. She then went on to work in many different roles, of course, including going back to Chloé eventually. Um, and then most recently, she's had like a few other roles. One of the highlights being she was at Salon, and then she worked at a denim brand briefly before being the creative director of Chloe.
Yeah, like, and learning her life really like through the article was, yeah, it's quite important to me. Like, yeah, especially when they're not like, let's say, famous quote unquote designers.
Mm,
So yeah.
yeah, it was also cool to see because in the article they were kind of saying how obviously she made a splash with her debut collection. That's facts. We've been talking about that. Her bringing back this bohemian boho chic
Mm.
back and all those kind of things. Um, they've been talking about how it was very well received and a lot of people are talking about the debut collection, which is definitely very true. But one, it was really cool to see like where exactly her inspiration point was coming from, because in the article they talk about how she was really inspired by this like Karl Lagerfeld's first tenure at Chloe, because obviously Karl Lagerfeld had two tenures at Chloe, and she was specifically inspired by work that he did in 1977, which was really interesting to see how that played out in the collections. Because she says she likes this idea of like a certain femininity, but also with an edge and kind of like a coolness that comes from like not caring, like a coolness that comes from being lackadaisical about
Yeah,
it. You're kind of just it just occurs naturally to you to be
a
kind of
calm
cool, but also
nonchalance. Yeah.
yeah, but also feminine and kind of chic in that way, which is cool because even when they were saying things historically, when it which I found really interesting actually, when they were saying how like when you look at the history of Chloe, which I'm very privy to, for guys that don't know, I actually did an interview with for Lou Stoppard, who actually wrote the Chloe book as part of the press run for the Chloe book, and she was talking about the history of the brand, Gabby Aguillon, the fact that it's a woman's brand for women by women, of course, minus the Karl Lagerfeld era, which a lot of people forget sometimes. That yes, it's a very woman forward brand, but Karl Lagerfeld also had a very very strong impact in the history of the brand. But definitely go and watch that interview because if you want to learn about um the history of Chloe, especially, I think that Lou Stoppard gave very very strong nuggets in that interview. And yeah, you can find the podcast online. But outside of that, it's also good to get different perspectives on the history of Chloe, which we got in this interview. They talked about, things like the fact that she was very much about making things very light. And back then, everything kind of had to be overly structured, but she wanted things to be light because it was all about, you know, women actually wearing things that are comfortable, but also don't make them die of sweat. You know what I mean? And Chemena Kamali has brought that into her collections where she's trying to make, clothing that's interesting and structured, but she's trying to see how can I make it really light so that these clothes don't weigh on you. And then when I wear them, I feel free. And so she gave like examples of like how she went to dinners and when she was at the dinner, everyone was kind of dressed to the nines, but everything was heavy and it was really warm and people were like dying of sweat and she was just there and her pieces that were a lot lighter and people were commending her on the fact that, oh, that's actually a really good idea to have fabrics that light. It's good to get that insight other than just what we're seeing aesthetically, um kind of like bringing that freedom from the history of the brand into the modern Chloe, I think is very very important.
Yeah, when I think about like the design direction, I have to go, to the origin of the reference generally, right? So whenever you say Bohemian, like I think Gypsy, and then I go to Romany and then think about, the people of Paris, the people of Italy, the people of like just the Mediterranean as well, how they dress, and just like the design points and the references that she would use for Chloe based on that. And she really did give herself like a wide berth in terms of, the type of silhouettes and then the type of design notes. And you got the fluted sleeves and the trumpet sleeves and all of these other things. But then again, you got the lightweight fabrics that is, quite Mediterranean. You got the sheer fabrics, right? But then you have the leathers there as well, right? And that the patented leathers that are more English, more like French and everything like that. So there are there's as much as there's one particular design direction, which is the bohemian. There's
Hmm.
still like a wide berth and a range that she can use because we see people pick a particular design directions, let's say Y2K, but stay in like quite a small box, quite a narrow box. But yeah, this one is quite broad and it's elegant as well. She's really like telling a nice calm story with it. And it's not necessarily like what Alexandra McKellar was doing with Bohemian as well, which is something I like.
Yeah, his thing was a bit more because Alessandra McKellar's version of it was more genderless, whereas this
Mm,
isn't trying to be genderless. This is
mm.
actually quite a lot about femininity because when you think of like what the brand stood for, that's kind of what it was about. It was centered around women. So it's a different perspective on it.
Yeah.
Um, but to go to like kind of the idea that this collection was really successful because it was, um, they said that when this runway show came out, and this is something that was in the article, they said that the Real Real saw a 37% spike in searches for Chloe the day after the show, and there was a 130% jump in sales the following month, which is insane.
Yeah, no, that was tremendous. And I wanted to say something else towards just tell me if I'm saying, oh wait, can you say her name right for me, please?
I say Chemena Kamali, but I could be
Okay.
wrong. It could be Chemena. I don't know. I need to learn that, to be honest.
Okay, so I've been saying Chimena as well. So like, let me go for that right now. If
If
I'm wrong,
if if it's wrong in the chat, you can
yeah,
I'm open to being corrected.
please,
People in the chat.
please, yeah. So but like I was gonna say, like she even talks about, her struggles with even the ideas and ideals about femininity, right? So she talks
Yeah,
about being a mother, but then also like wanting to be successful in the office, but then also wanting to be a successful woman. And like, no offense to Alexandra, but that's not something that he could even compute, right? So she's really coming at this from the lens of that particular woman who's, as much as there's all of these emotions that are probably going on with her and like, these crises of conscience, there's still this
yeah,
calm nonchalance and elegance about the woman that she's designing for, which is, good to hear. And I'm sure this was going to resonate with a lot of women, to be fair, especially this
yeah,
article.
yeah. I was gonna say that I even think the rollout of everything was so smart. Like even this idea of having an artificial it piece. Like I remember at the time when the show came out, this clip that I put on the screen was all the rage, where they had all the VIPs at the front wearing the same wedges. And these wedges like became really big when they came out. A lot of people are talking about them. So they've kind of artificially created like an it shoe. And I thought the marketing and the rollout of also the shoes around the debut and just like different pieces was also really intelligent. So I liked what they did there. It's kind of like in your face, kind of like, shoved down your throat that you must look at these shoes. But I thought it was quite interesting because I haven't seen like a brand do something this blatant for a really long time. So it made for a moment that's always in my memory that I always remember.
Didn't they say in the article that one of the pictures was the reason why it went viral or something like that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Sienna Miller, Pat Cleveland, Kiana Shipka. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so it was phenomenal. Like seeing it like this though is quite active. Like I've only really seen the pictures. um but yeah, no, that's interesting to see. Like this is yeah, so blatant, which is funny. It's kind of,
Yeah,
yeah, it's jokes in a way. It's like poking fun at yourself, but at the same time, creating a moment that is necessary for the brand, right? So whether we spoke
exactly.
about it positively or negatively, the fact that we spoke about it is exactly what they wanted.
Exactly. And some other things that stood out to me in the article. I remember her saying a quote that I wrote down and I'll read it out. She said, "If you grew up as a German girl wanting to study fashion, Karl Lagerfeld was the ultimate icon." And I thought that was interesting because, of course, her growing up in Germany and the fact that she's very inspired by Karl Lagerfeld's work at Chloe. Like it's a big inspiration point. Like she said, her first collection was very much inspired by many things, but a big point of it was Karl Lagerfeld's work from 1977. And I wonder, just as in a general sense, I wonder in Germany if people have this like patriotic viewpoint on their designers like Karl Lagerfeld or like Jill Sander, because I feel like in a lot of European countries there isn't that general like wider, you know, we really love these designers because we're from here. That's why sometimes when I go to Belgium, people actually appreciate me more because I'm an outsider that really loves the Belgian designers. Whereas a lot of Belgian people have told me that the Belgians in Belgium don't really appreciate their fashion as much as like people that are obsessed with it from the US or from France or the UK or wherever. Um, so I wonder. That's very very interesting that she said that. Boa says, wasn't Karl Lagerfeld ashamed of being German? Yeah, he was actually. He was. The blue key left says, I think so for Karl Lagerfeld because I've heard Brenna hashtag speaking about him exactly the same in one of her videos. Oh, that okay, that's really interesting. Because yeah, Brenda is German. So it was just an interesting thing for me to think about that. Is that how, like people that are in the fashion industry or go to fashion school in Germany. Those are like their people, like Jill Sander, Karl
Mm.
Lagerfeld. Very, very interesting.
You do have to think though, like with Karl Lagerfeld's generation, it was, post World War II Germany. So his patriotism versus her patriotism would be completely different, especially considering that she was an immigrant, right?
Right.
So I guess in quotes, the country that gave her all the opportunities, not speaking to her life, but the country that gave her all the opportunities and forethought, yeah, she'll look towards Karl Lagerfeld and just generally be Karl Lagerfeld is lauded in fashion regardless. So whether you're from
Yeah.
Germany or London or America, you're gonna like him. And like just thinking about like her growing up in Orange County, right? Laguna
Yeah.
Beach. There's gonna be those girls with the Chanel bags out there. It's just one of those things. So like it probably carried with her just whether she knew it or not, which just makes his airs, his aura just even much more present with her. So I can see how that she can adore him and him not adore where he's from just based on the context of his history with Germany, right? So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I like even going back to like femininity and power with Chloe, the fact that Chimena has actually dressed Kamala Harris for a few appearances because she was saying that she wants Chloe to represent like femininity and confidence, and obviously someone that's that high in the political field to dress someone like that makes a lot of sense. Um, Something that I also found really interesting is this idea of it seems like brands now are a bit more accommodating to mothers, which I really love. Because you touched on it earlier where she was saying that she's balancing her work life with her home life and her kids and all these things. And it seems very much like fashion is more open to and to supporting mothers, which I absolutely love. I remember back in the day, Phoebe Philo had a lot of problems with that. So it's good to see that that has improved in fashion. That's why Phoebe Philo had to quit, because the workload was insane, and also the there wasn't really a lot of support in that sense. So that's something great to see. I also like the technical things that they talked about in the article. The fact they talked about, Chemena Kamali was like sifting through the Chloe archives and looking at Karl Lagerfeld's clothes, who I've mentioned before is a big inspiration to her, and how he used to make these really heavily unconstructed garments at Chloe. The fact that they would have as little seams as possible, as little finishing. And the reason for that is because Gabby Aguillon was always all about the clothing being lightweight and everything being light. And that's still so true to the history because Chimena Kamali is trying to bring those ideas into the modern Chloe. And if you think of all the way back to Gabby Aguillon, back to when she founded Chloe in 1952, the fact that her first collection consisted of like 6 dresses, inspired by lightweight sporting club outfits, um, the fact that Gabby Aguillon used to look at like haute couture as like a very interesting concept, but she didn't like the idea that haute couture was kind of like this thing that you wear for special occasions for really, the wealthiest of the wealthiest. She wanted clothing that kind of was a couture level thing, but ready to wear. So couture level, but it's fit to wear daily because it's lightweight, because it's easy to move around, because it's so comfortable, because it's not restrictive on the body, and those kind of things. So it's high quality, but it should be seen and worn by women in the streets. That was something um that I've always loved about Chloe, but also it was just good for them to bring that back into the article. But yeah, any closing thoughts, Dami, before we move into the next topic?
Um Maybe. Well, did you talk about her at CSM and everything like that? I'm guessing you did, right?
Yeah. I touched on it. The fact she
Okay.
went to CSM, yeah, for
Yeah.
her MA.
My closing thoughts is I find her life interesting. There's a lot of things that I want to know more about now. Like I do want to know the tea on her husband working for Pfizer.
Yep.
Uh, her like moving to Laguna Beach, like does that is that emphasized in her clothes at all? Like, cause or like the OC, so it's like beach wear, like sun-kissed skin, and like you know what I'm saying.
Hmm.
So and flowy clothes and everything like that. So I'm really looking forward to maybe a spring summer. Seeing if she's gonna, you know, have some seersucker there, some pins, not pinstripes, some striped tops, you know, those things. Like and I'm really interested in the fact that she didn't emphasize being tomboyish or boyish at
Right,
all, or
right.
even like androgynous per se. Like she really
But would you
emphasized.
associate Chloe with being androgynous? I personally
Um,
wouldn't.
no, 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 but this is the thing, right? Like, there are some people that would put bohemian in that like sphere, right? And
Yeah.
I like the fact that she is emphasizing femininity. Like, that's my main point. And I want to see more of, you know, her depicting it in this way. And I think that she could, like, doing what she's doing, she could be really popular,
Mm,
or not even just popular, but like just do really, really great collections with the emphasizing of femininity. We've seen men do it great, like over the past couple of years and things of that nature. So I like the direction that she's taken. I want to see more of it.
yeah, I totally agree. I do think that there's a certain buzz around Chloe again, and I think it can only fare well for the brand, to be honest. Um, I think it can only be a positive thing. Zero enters. How many times can you revitalize the boho aesthetic? As many times as needed. This YouTube channel runs on your support. If you want to support the channel, you can subscribe to my Patreon. You'll gain access to exclusive content that includes everything from my Patreon podcast, where I give a behind the scenes insight into the fashion industry, as well as a fashion book club where I review my favorite fashion books. You can also check out my fashion ebook, which highlights the best fashion journalists to follow, definitions of common fashion terminology, and how to determine what a good source of fashion information is. The links to everything are in the description below.